be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus said, "My sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish. No one can take them out of my hand. My Father who has given them to me is greater than all, and no one can take them out of the Father's hand. The Father and I are one." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Well, everyone, on today, the fourth Sunday of Easter, typically we call this Sunday in the church, we call it the Sunday of the Good Shepherd. It is this Sunday every year that we hear from the 10th chapter of John's Gospel, right, where he spoke the infamous words, right, "I am the Good Shepherd." And it's very providential and, very beautiful that on this Sunday, right, this comes right after we just got our new, right, earthly shepherd, Pope Leo the 14th, right? I know that many of us we were following closely, and as you know, technically any baptized Catholic man can become a pope. So I'm sorry for those of you who are hoping to be the first American pope, right? That option's no longer available, right, to any of us. Maybe the second American pope, who knows, right? But today on this Good Shepherd Sunday, in the wake of that election, right, it's a wonderful time of hope, right, about our church and about our new and beloved Holy Father. Right? I was watching with the staff when he came out on the balcony, and I'll never forget how shocking it was. First of all, that it was an American pope. I mean, really, who would have thought, right, we'd get an American pope? Right? And then, of course, the name, right? Papa Leone XIV, right? And all of a sudden, I just got really excited, right? Leo the 14th, and all of us and the staff, we got really excited, right? This name, Leo the 14th. And the name of a new pope is very significant. Usually, when they pick their new name, it signifies a saint who has inspired them, or a previous pope, right, who has inspired their vision, right, for the church. And so, of course, as many of you have probably learned and read about, right, he took his name from Pope Leo the 13th, right, Pope Leo the 13th. Right? And I know that not all of us are church historians here, so you may not be familiar with Pope Leo the 13th, but really in the last 2 centuries, there have probably been no popes who have impacted the world more than John Paul II, right? Most of us had the privilege of being alive for, but also than Pope Leo the 13th, about 100 years before that. And the reason why he was so impactful is because he was the Pope of the Church at the turn of the 20th century. So at the very end of the 1800s. Think about what it would have been like to be alive in that time. The beginning and fruition of the Industrial Revolution completely changed the daily existence, right, of people in our world. At that time, the world was much more similar to what it was, in the first century than it even is to our day today, right? Just 100 years later. There was so much change in technology and industry. There was so much advancement taking place in science, so much so that people were questioning, right, the ancient religious views that shaped our civilization. For so many years, people were told that, the planet Earth is the center of the solar system, right? And has this privileged place, right, in the galaxy and the universe. And all of a sudden, the more they learned about the stars and the skies, they realized that, we're just one tiny planet in the midst of many, in the midst of millions of other solar systems and galaxies, right? And the universe is so vast. The rise of the discovery of evolution changed how people thought about the creation of the world. Now, you guys know that, a little soapbox of mine is that some of those scientific theories, they're actually starting to get reversed. But regardless, it was completely changing how people thought about the world. All of a sudden, the world was much more vast and large, and we were so much smaller than people had thought. There was also a tremendous amount of political turnover in the world. Many of us, when we think about revolutions and the way that so many countries in the world today, they don't have monarchies anymore. They have democracies and republics. And many of us, we have an overly romantic idea of what that is, because here in the United States, we're fortunate enough where it really worked out, right? Here we are 250 years later, and we're, the most dominant world power. But many countries during the 1800s who had those same revolutions had the opposite results: chaos, right, and instability. And many of them are still recovering today. That's part of what led to so many of the tyrannical revolutions of the 20th century, the instability that was created. There was a rise of Freemasonry. And in those days, Freemasonry was basically setting itself up as an alternative religion to Christianity. A religion that didn't need the Bible or the teachings of Jesus, but rather was like a religion of all of humanity, right? And all religions combined into one. It was a relativistic idea of the truth in religion. Because of that, even still to this day, right, Catholics are not supposed to be Freemasons. But all of this change was happening in the days of Pope Leo XIII. And so everybody in the church wondered, right, about the future of Christianity, the future of the church, the future of religion. Everything was changing. And Pope Leo XIII, his immediate predecessor, basically took a stance of rejection of the modern world. And he said, all this chaos, all this change, all this political upheaval, right, all these false truths, it's time for the church to basically close our doors and strengthen ourselves and hunker down and focus internally. So he had a very negative and pessimistic view of the modern world. And so many people wondered, again, when Pope Leo XIII was elected, how would he respond? And nobody could have been prepared. As a matter of fact, he was already very old when he was elected, so they thought he was just going to kind of be a transitionary pope, and turned out he lived for 26 more years. Proved everybody wrong. But the stance that he took, in contrary to the one who preceded him, was he believed that it was not a time for a retreat or fear, but rather all the changes in the modern world only proved that the world desperately needed the truth of Christ, the message of the gospel, the fullness and beauty of the tradition and history of the Catholic Church and her teachings. And so he opened the doors wide. But even though many people thought, we need to update the teachings, we need to modernize our doctrines, we need to kind of sacrifice some of these things that the modern world is opposed to, right? He took the opposite stance. He said a watered-down version of our faith is not going to do anybody any good. The world needs the fullness of Christ's message, the beauty of the Catholic faith. And it's true even in our own day. One of the quotes that I'm always reminded of another great evangelist, right? Archbishop Fulton Sheen, who had his famous television show on TV, right? One of the famous quotes he used to tell people is he said, there are hundreds and thousands of people in the world who hate what they think the Catholic Church is. They have so many misunderstandings and a lack of true catechesis. So they hate what they think the church is. But time and time again, as he would bring converts into the church and he would educate them in the faith in all its fullness, he found that, there's not even 10 people in the world who hate what the Catholic Church truly is. So many misconceptions, misunderstandings. And I would attest to the same thing. That's one of the common experiences I hear from converts going through OCIA. They never knew any of this before. They had so many misconceptions. Even in my time in seminary, all those years of learning more and more about the faith, it was like it never got old. I just wanted more and more. The more we learn about the teachings of the church or about the inspiring example of all the saints and holy people throughout the ages, about how the church has impacted the world, right? Spreading mercy and works of charity all throughout the Christian world. Our faith is one of the most beautiful things we possess in this life, and the privilege of being a member of this church, right? This community of heaven here on earth. It's one of the greatest privileges and blessings we possess. And Pope Leo XIII realized that, and I would venture to say that one of the reasons why Pope Leo XIV chose that name is because he believes the same things. Now is not a time to flee or water down. The modern world, in all of its change, still needs Christ, still needs the community of the church. Pope Leo XIII, one of the other things he was known for, and this will be relevant to many of you, especially if you come to daily Mass, right, is that Pope Leo XIII was the one who wrote the St. Michael prayer. Pope Leo XIII, again, as the world was becoming more modern and people were giving up on traditional religion, or they were giving up on belief in God and even the fact that there's a devil. Right? Pope Leo XIII, he had a vision while he was celebrating Mass of the devil attacking the church, attacking the world. And so he asked that churches throughout the world, at the end of every Mass, would recite this prayer to St. Michael that he wrote. St. Michael, the great warrior from the beginning of time, right, who has battled with the devil and his angels. And so, of course, again, Pope Leo XIV, I can't imagine it's a coincidence that he likewise recognizes so many people don't believe that there is a God, or that there really is evil and a devil, and wants us to call that to mind. So all in all, I think all of us should be very grateful and excited for this new stage of the church. One of our very own from our own nation, leading the church. And we can all pray that he might have the courage and the fortitude and the wisdom to fulfill his office. And he deserves the prayers of all of us as he begins this new journey. Now let us stand and profess our faith.